Have you ever lost someone who loved you with all their heart, only to realize too late what they truly meant to you? That ache, that hollow feeling in your chest, it doesn't always come with tears or loud cries. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the silent moments when you're alone, when the world seems ordinary, but your heart feels extraordinary in its emptiness. Losing someone like that isn't just about them leaving your life. It's about confronting the truth you've avoided for so long. And if you stay with this video until the end, you will discover not only the hidden patterns behind this loss, but also the lessons that can transform your own life before it's too late. Some people are naturally drawn to love. They give freely, openly, without hesitation. They pour themselves into relationships with a depth that is rare. And then there are those who pull back, who keep their walls high, who protect their hearts even when it hurts others. Avoidants. They are not cold, not truly. But their fear of being hurt, of being vulnerable, often pushes them away from the very love they secretly crave. And when an avoidant loses someone who truly loved them, the reaction is not always obvious. There is no dramatic explosion, no angry outburst. Instead, there is a quiet storm inside, a subtle earthquake that shakes them in ways they never expected. It starts with realization, that sudden, undeniable moment when they notice the absence, the person who stayed through their moods, who offered patience when the world demanded performance, who loved without condition, is gone. And in that absence, there is clarity. For the first time, they see the weight of their own choices. Every wall built, every distance kept, every time they pushed away out of fear, it all comes into focus. And it hurts, not just for a day, not just for a moment. The pain lingers because it is not just the loss of another person. It is the loss of what could have been. The loss of a connection that would have changed them in ways they will never forget. This pain is different. It is sharp, but it also humbles. It forces self-reflection. Avoidants are used to control, to keeping emotions at arm's length. But loss has a way of breaking even the strongest defenses. And here's the truth. The moment they feel it fully, they are confronted with themselves. Their own fears, their own insecurities, their own inability to stay present in the love that was offered. That confrontation is uncomfortable, and it should be, because growth rarely comes in comfort. Human psychology tells us that the mind often avoids pain, but when avoidance fails, when love slips through fingers too tightly clenched, the heart becomes awake in a way that no lecture, no argument, no advice could ever create. What happens next is fascinating. There is no magic, no sudden transformation, but there is awareness, and awareness is the first step toward change. Avoidants start to see patterns they ignored for years. They recognize the moments when they were emotionally absent, when they prioritized comfort over connection, when fear overruled desire. And in that recognition, there is both regret and opportunity. The regret is natural. It is human. But the opportunity, that is where motivation is born. Because if someone who loved you that deeply could leave, it is not the love that failed. It is the choice to protect oneself at the cost of connection that must be questioned. Think about it. What does it truly cost to avoid love out of fear? What doors remain closed? What relationships never fully bloom? When a person loses someone who loved them without reservation, the void left behind is not just about absence. It is about what they missed, what they could have experienced, what they could have learned, and the growth they postponed. And this is where the power of reflection comes in. Because every person watching this can ask themselves the same questions. Every person has the ability to look at the walls they have built, at the fears that hold them back, and at the love they may be taking for granted. The psychology of motivation tells us that awareness combined with emotional resonance is the spark for action. And feeling this deeply, even through the lens of another's loss, can awaken a desire to change before it's too late. Here's the reward of staying with this video. By understanding how avoidants react when they lose someone who truly loved them, you are not just learning about others. You are learning about yourself. You are learning to recognize patterns that could be sabotaging your own happiness. You are learning that love is not about perfection, but about presence. You are learning that fear should never outweigh the opportunity for connection. And most importantly, you are learning that no matter how far you may have pushed love away in the past, awareness today can be the first step toward a different tomorrow. The human mind often fears loss more than it cherishes presence. We underestimate what we have until it's gone, and psychology shows that regret is one of the most potent motivators for change. Pain has a way of cutting through denial, stripping away excuses, and revealing truth. And in that truth lies power. The power to act differently, to love more consciously, to be braver in the face of vulnerability. It is in the silent ache of loss that the seeds of transformation are planted, and once planted, they grow. So ask yourself this: if someone loved you with everything they had, and you let them slip away, what would you feel? How would your heart respond if it were quiet, yet full of undeniable regret? And more importantly, how would you choose to live differently from that moment onward? That is the journey we are beginning in this video, the journey of understanding, reflection, and transformation. By the end of this video, you will not only see why avoidants react the way they do, but you will also gain insights into how to embrace love more fully, how to confront fear before it closes doors permanently, and how to act in ways that prevent regret from defining your life. Stay with it, stay present, and let the understanding of loss guide you toward a life where love is never wasted and where growth begins the moment awareness takes hold. Some people are naturally drawn to connection, while others instinctively keep a distance. Avoidants belong to the latter. Their hearts crave love, yet their minds are trained to protect themselves at all costs. This protection is not cruelty, it is survival. From early experiences to patterns repeated over time, avoidants have learned that closeness can hurt, that dependency may lead to disappointment, and that vulnerability often carries a hidden risk. This is why, even when someone enters their life with pure intentions and unwavering love, avoidants react in ways that seem distant or detached. It is not the absence of feeling, it is the fear of feeling too much. Imagine living with this constant push and pull inside your own heart. The desire for intimacy collides with the instinct to withdraw. The longing to belong is tempered by the need to remain safe. Avoidants often oscillate between engagement and retreat. They come close, offering glimpses of warmth, only to pull back before they are fully exposed. This behavior is confusing to those around them, especially to someone who loves without hesitation. And yet, it is a pattern that protects them from the intensity of emotions they are not yet ready to face. When they lose someone who truly loved them, the first reaction is not immediate panic or dramatics. Instead, it is subtle disorientation. The world suddenly feels unfamiliar. The routines, the distractions, the walls they have built, all of it seems insufficient to fill the emptiness left behind. Human psychology shows us that avoidants, like everyone, are capable of deep attachment, but their attachment is often masked by distance. The loss of a person who accepted them completely awakens feelings they have long suppressed. Regret surfaces not as loud cries, but as a quiet recognition of what they failed to nurture. This quiet recognition is powerful. It is a confrontation with the truth they have avoided. Love cannot be measured, controlled, or postponed indefinitely. It cannot be ignored without consequence. The absence of the one who truly loved them forces reflection. Avoidants begin to see the moments they missed, times they chose comfort over courage, independence over connection, and self-preservation over vulnerability. Every hesitation, every retreat, every silent refusal to lean in now carries a weight they cannot ignore. In this state, the mind begins a process of deep introspection. Avoidants analyze their own behavior not to excuse it, but to understand it. They ask themselves questions they never considered before. What held me back? Why did I distance myself from someone so genuine? Could I have chosen differently? This internal inquiry is often uncomfortable because it reveals patterns they have repeated for years. Yet it is necessary. Motivation arises when awareness meets responsibility. The mind recognizes the cost of inaction, and the heart feels the sting of lost opportunity. Loss teaches clarity. It shows avoidants the difference between fear and wisdom. Fear keeps them at a distance, but wisdom can guide them toward meaningful connection. When the person who loved them unconditionally is gone, they begin to grasp the significance of love that does not require perfect timing or flawless conditions. They understand that love, when genuine, is resilient. It asks for presence, patience, and courage, not control or safety. And in losing it, avoidants confront the stark reality of what avoidance truly costs: the chance to experience the fullness of human connection. The psychological response is profound. Avoidants often experience a mixture of emptiness, longing, and self-blame. They recognize the gap between desire and action, between knowing what was valuable and actually holding on to it. This moment is both painful and transformative. Motivation is hidden within this pain, because once the walls begin to crumble and once the mind sees what avoidance has taken away, there is an opportunity to evolve. The same mechanisms that once kept them distant can be retrained to embrace courage and presence. It is important to understand that change is never instantaneous. Avoidants do not suddenly become open-hearted the moment loss strikes. Growth is gradual, built in layers of awareness, reflection, and small, intentional choices. The key is the recognition that love is not something to be feared. It is something to be understood, appreciated, and nurtured. They begin to see that fear of loss should never outweigh the willingness to risk connection. Every regret becomes a lesson, every absence a mirror reflecting what could have been, and every heartbeat a reminder that opportunity is finite. This section of awareness also teaches responsibility. Avoidants realize that their behavior has consequences beyond themselves. Love is not a one-sided transaction. It is an exchange of care, trust, and commitment. When someone gives it fully, it deserves presence, not avoidance. And when it is lost, the emptiness left behind is not just about the person who departed, it is about the part of themselves that failed to engage fully in life, fully in love, and fully in connection. Motivation lies in this realization. Understanding the cost of avoidance can inspire immediate action to embrace love more consciously, before patterns solidify into permanent absence. Finally, the loss ignites the possibility of transformation. Avoidants, when confronted with what they have lost, are compelled to look inward. They discover that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. They learn that vulnerability is not weakness, but strength disguised as openness. And most importantly, they begin to see that the love they lost while gone serves as a guide for how to live differently moving forward. It reminds them that connection is essential, not optional, that presence matters more than perfection, and that every moment they allow walls to rise is a moment that could never be reclaimed. Understanding this is a powerful gift, not a punishment. The void left by someone who loved them completely can ignite awareness, self-reflection, and growth. And through this understanding, they can begin to rebuild, not just in relationships with others, but in the relationship with themselves. Motivation comes from recognizing patterns, feeling the weight of their consequences, and choosing a different path. Avoidants, like anyone, have the capacity to evolve, but it starts with seeing the truth, accepting it, and letting it guide their choices toward connection, presence, and courage. The moment avoidants begin to feel the emptiness left by someone who truly loved them, a quiet shift starts to take place within. It is subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it grows with each reflection, each memory, each realization of what they have lost. For years, they have relied on control, routines, and emotional distance to navigate life. They believed that by keeping feelings at bay, they could protect themselves. Yet now, in the absence of that unconditional love, they discover a new reality. Protection without connection comes at a cost far greater than any risk they once feared. Loss forces the mind to pay attention. Avoidants, who once moved through life detached, suddenly become aware of the moments they overlooked. The laughter they dismissed, the conversations they avoided, the comfort they rejected, all resurface in memory, demanding acknowledgement. Psychology shows that humans are wired to learn from absence as much as presence. Avoidants, though often resistant to reflection, cannot escape this inner reckoning. The mind begins to catalog every choice, every hesitation, and every retreat, revealing the hidden consequences of emotional avoidance. The first feelings are often confusion and disbelief. They ask themselves, how did it come to this? How could someone so patient, so giving, leave? The truth is simple yet profound. Love cannot survive without reciprocity. Even the strongest patience has limits. Even the deepest care requires acknowledgement. Avoidants, confronted with this reality, experience a mixture of remorse and awakening. It is in this space, between regret and awareness, that real transformation can begin. The human heart responds not to lectures or warnings, but to the undeniable truth of what has been lost. Once recognition sets in, avoidants often enter a period of introspection. They examine the patterns that led to this loss. The tendency to retreat when intimacy grows, the habit of valuing independence over connection, the fear of being vulnerable even when it mattered most. Reflection here is not about self-punishment. It is about understanding. Motivation arises when comprehension meets accountability. They realize that avoidance is not a shield but a barrier, a limitation that prevented a full experience of love, joy, and companionship. The pain they feel now is the catalyst for deeper insight. In this introspective state, they begin to see the profound value of what they once had. Love, they understand, is not about grand gestures or constant excitement. It is about consistency, patience, and genuine presence. The person they lost offered all of this freely, without conditions or demands. And yet, avoidants, trapped in their fear of closeness, failed to engage fully. This awareness can be painful, but it is also a teacher. It highlights the difference between fear-driven behavior and intentional choice, between hiding from love and embracing it. Regret, when understood properly, is more than sorrow. It is a mirror reflecting untapped potential. Avoidants learn that the absence of someone who truly cared is not just a void, it is a message. It is a chance to confront their limitations, to challenge old patterns, and to imagine a life where fear does not dictate actions. Psychology emphasizes that moments of deep emotional impact have the greatest power to reshape behavior. For avoidance, loss serves as this impact. It ignites a spark, a desire to no longer let fear override the chance to connect, to no longer let walls determine the course of relationships, and to no longer allow distance to define intimacy. At this stage, a new awareness emerges, the difference between survival and thriving. Avoidants have long equated distance with safety, believing that protecting themselves from emotional exposure prevents pain. But thriving requires engagement. True growth, emotional resilience, and fulfillment come from connection, not isolation. The loss of someone who truly loved them forces this distinction into sharp relief. They realize that living cautiously is not enough. Life demands courage, presence, and the willingness to risk vulnerability for meaningful connection. This awakening also challenges deeply held beliefs about love. Avoidants often view attachment as a threat to freedom, equating dependence with weakness. But in the wake of genuine loss, they begin to understand that connection does not diminish freedom, it expands it. Love that is freely given and consciously received creates strength, confidence, and emotional richness. By reflecting on what they lost, avoidants start to see that vulnerability is not a liability, but a bridge, a path to experiences and relationships far deeper than what avoidance ever allowed. Emotional growth is rarely comfortable. Avoidants face their own resistance as they confront truths they have long denied. The fear that once protected them now threatens to paralyze reflection. Yet motivation comes from embracing this discomfort. The mind begins to recognize the long-term consequences of avoidance and compares it with the fleeting security it once provided. The choice becomes clear. Continue in patterns that isolate or learn from loss and open the door to connection, empathy, and genuine presence. The path forward is subtle but powerful. Avoidants may start by observing their reactions, by questioning the impulses that led to withdrawal, and by acknowledging the emotions they once ignored. They learn that self-awareness is not passive. It is active, deliberate, and transformative. The lessons of lost love are not only about what cannot be regained, they are about what can be changed, corrected, and embraced in the present. Every thought, every memory, every quiet moment of reflection is a step toward emotional evolution. Ultimately, this period of reckoning shapes not only how avoidants view love, but also how they view themselves. They learn that fear is natural, but fear should never govern choices. They realize that presence matters more than perfection, and that courage is measured not by avoiding pain, but by facing it with openness. And most importantly, they discover that every loss, no matter how painful, carries the potential for growth, for self-discovery, and for creating a future where connection is no longer avoided, but embraced fully. When avoidants face the reality of losing someone who truly loved them, the first emotions are often confusion and emptiness. But soon a deeper, more intense process begins. They start noticing the subtle ways love had touched their lives, moments they overlooked, gestures they dismissed, patience they took for granted. For years, they have relied on distance to feel safe, yet in that very absence, they are forced to confront a truth they cannot escape. Protecting themselves too much comes at the cost of what could have been their deepest happiness. Psychology shows that humans are wired to learn most powerfully through emotional impact, and for avoidance, the pain of loss becomes an undeniable teacher. The initial shock fades, replaced by self-reflection. Avoidants begin to replay interactions in their minds, analyzing every decision, every withdrawal, and every time they avoided intimacy. This process is not about self-punishment. It is about understanding consequences. Motivation grows when reflection meets clarity. They realize that by keeping walls high, they prevented connection, not just with others, but with themselves. Every choice made out of fear suddenly appears in sharp focus, and the understanding of what was lost is both heavy and enlightening. There is also a subtle awakening to the depth of human attachment. Avoidants, who may have believed that emotional distance is harmless, now recognize that relationships thrive on presence, consistency, and emotional honesty. Losing someone who gave love freely exposes the truth. Love is not about perfection or timing. It is about commitment, attention, and courage. This realization challenges the patterns that shape them. Every retreat, every avoidance, every moment of withdrawal is now seen as a missed opportunity. Motivation comes from this awareness, from understanding that love lost can teach what presence never could. At this stage, avoidants often encounter a strong inner conflict. Their instinct is still to retreat, to protect themselves from vulnerability, yet the heart pulls them toward awareness and change. This tension is powerful because it forces them to confront fear directly. Psychology explains that conflict between desire and avoidance can create intense self-motivation. When the mind sees clearly what it lost and the heart longs for connection, avoidance begins to lose its grip. The individual realizes that emotional safety achieved by distance is temporary, but the growth and fulfillment offered by vulnerability are lasting. As this realization strengthens, avoidants start seeing patterns beyond themselves. They recognize how fear of closeness has shaped not only their relationships, but their overall experience of life. They understand that avoidance may have offered comfort, but it also limited joy, intimacy, and emotional richness. Motivation rises from seeing the contrast between what was protected and what was sacrificed. The absence of someone who loved them becomes a mirror, reflecting choices that shaped the past and guiding actions for the future. Every reflection inspires the understanding that change is possible and necessary. In this process, avoidants begin to embrace the value of emotional honesty. They see that hiding feelings, avoiding conflict, or suppressing desire for connection only postpones inevitable reckoning. True strength, they learn, lies not in detachment, but in engagement. Facing emotions openly, even when it is uncomfortable, builds resilience, clarity, and deeper fulfillment. Motivation emerges from the knowledge that every effort to connect, to communicate, and to love consciously can prevent the hollow emptiness they now feel from repeating in the future. There is also a growing recognition of responsibility. Avoidants learn that love is not a one-way street. When someone offers it fully, it demands presence in return. Neglecting this presence has consequences, not just for the relationship, but for the personal growth that comes from shared experience. Losing someone who loved them awakens awareness of these responsibilities, showing the cost of avoidance and the reward of engagement. Motivation is born when they see clearly that every choice shapes not only connection, but also their own emotional evolution. Through this awakening, avoidants also experience a deep desire for transformation. They recognize that patterns of avoidance are not immutable. Emotional intelligence, courage, and vulnerability can be cultivated deliberately. The pain of loss becomes a guiding force, compelling them to act differently, to approach relationships with openness, and to prioritize connection over comfort. Psychology emphasizes that powerful emotional experiences like loss are often the catalysts that trigger lasting behavioral change. For avoidants, this moment becomes the turning point between repetition of old patterns and the possibility of meaningful growth. Another subtle change occurs in their perception of love itself. Avoidants begin to understand that love is not a threat, but a source of strength. They learn that attachment does not weaken independence, it enhances emotional depth. By reflecting on what they lost, they grasp that true love requires courage, presence, and willingness to engage despite fear. Motivation arises from seeing love not as something to control, but as something to embrace consciously, fully, and without hesitation. Finally, avoidants reach a stage where they confront their own potential. They realize that the void left by someone who loved them can serve as a map, guiding them toward better choices, deeper connections, and self-discovery. The pain of loss transforms into opportunity. Every reflection, every regret, every emotional insight becomes a tool for personal growth. The motivation here is profound. Understanding what has been lost inspires action, and action leads to a future where love is no longer avoided but embraced fully. This stage of awareness does not erase the past, but it equips avoidants with clarity, purpose, and resolve. They see that the fear that once controlled them is not stronger than the desire to live fully, connect deeply, and love consciously. Motivation, in its purest form, comes from the recognition that every day presents a choice, to repeat avoidance or to act with courage. The absence of someone who loved them becomes a lasting lesson, showing that vulnerability is not weakness, regret can fuel change, and every moment of conscious engagement is a step toward a richer, more connected life.